I'd like to welcome the other panelists that'll be joining us today. I don't know if we normally call them panelists. Usually it's co-hosts or guests or some other terminology, but we'll lean into the Zoom wording now that we're using Zoom webinars. So I'm thrilled to be having a number of people from the Divine Renovation team joining us, and of course from St. Benedict Parish. So it's exciting for us all to be here today for this webinar. I want to welcome Eric Myatt. It's good to see you, Eric.
Hi, Dan. Hello, everybody.
Fiona O'Reilly.
Hi, guys.
And Father Alex Colautti. It's good to see you, Father Alex.
It's great to be here. Hello, everybody.
Excellent. So look, guys, we're in an interesting time. And so at an interesting time, I think it's important for us to come together and have important and crucial conversations. Now, if I could, just before we go too far, I'd love for us all for a lot of our audience who might be new to Divine Renovation or not be familiar with all of you, if we could just take a moment and maybe starting with you, Eric, just share who you are and what your connection is to the ministry and what you do.
Yes, so I started recently with Divine Renovation. I'm the Canadian coordinator, so helping to grow the ministry here in Canada.
And Fiona.
Hi, guys. I am the Director of Global Strategy for Divine Renovation. That's a role I started last year, and before that I spent about 25 years in management consulting.
And Father Alex.
Hello, everybody. My name is Father Alex. I'm the Associate Pastor at St. Benedict Parish here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and I am in my second year of priesthood, so very much just learning how to be a priest and lead and all that kind of stuff.
So you got a pandemic in your first 2 years of priesthood. I think that's you're shooting for the stars, man. Way to go. So I'm Dan O'Rourke. I'm president of Divine Renovation Ministry, which means I get to work with a lot of really cool people as we look to inspire and equip parishes to be missional, because that's at the end of the day what Divine Renovation is here to do, is to inspire and equip parishes to be missional. And in this season, what we know is that all parishes are still living out their mission, the mission that Jesus gave them, which is to bring people into loving union with God. So Father Alex, with that spirit in mind, could you lead us in a prayer?
Yeah, sure. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Gracious, loving Father, we praise and thank you for this day which you have made. We thank you, Lord, for this opportunity to be church in the time of global uncertainty. We thank you, Lord, that you've called us into leadership to lead your church in this time. We pray that you would fill us with your wisdom, fill us with inspiration. And Father, help us to see how you're moving and acting at this time so that we can get in line with the new and various ways that you are doing things here in our world. We ask you to fill us with your spirit of wisdom and revelation, to know your will and to discern the signs of the times. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much to all of you who are able to join us live, and those who are not catching this live but might be catching a recording of it. You're most welcome to be with us, and I hope you joined us in prayer because we are united as a church in these unusual times. Speaking of being united as a church, part of what we're looking to speak today about is how do we work well together inside of our parishes, inside of our teams in this unusual time. What are some of the tools and approaches that we know can work as parish leaders all over the world try and wrap their heads around these new circumstances and how things are operating. Father Alex, I know you and the team at St. Benedict Parish. Now, St. Benedict Parish is a larger staff team. Now, some parishes have no staff, some have one staff, but every pastor, every parish priest has a team of some sort, some people around them. And if you don't, then it's far past time for you to figure out how to get one, because at this point you can't lead solo, not in these circumstances. So recognizing that we all have teams, whether we're on a senior leadership team or in a ministry team, whether we're a pastor or a ministry lead or some other clergy member, we all are operating inside of a teams in this environment. And I know St. Benedict Parish, you've got plenty of different teams because you do have a larger staff and you do have a number of ministry leads, both volunteer and paid, that are operating there. Could you give us a sense, Father Alex, what are some of the things that continue to happen in the parish environment that in this weird time where we're all on lockdown and unable to travel and be with each other physically?
Yeah, so, this is, times are changing fast, or tons of chaos. And I think the tendency is to take the hand off the throttle, let's slow everything down, and things are shutting down. And the way we do ministry has changed overnight. And so, but we're very much on how do we advance the mission? How do we speed up? How do we put the pedal to the metal, right? Because we have these crazy challenges, but we have incredible opportunity, I think, that I've never seen in my lifetime, that's for sure. And so we're really trying to figure out how do we ramp up things like Alpha, our Connect groups, our discipleship groups, our Lenten groups. How do we flip to meeting people's needs online and digitally? So for example, last Friday, we couldn't gather in the church because of, the situation with COVID-19 here on the ground. And so Tanya led Alpha online for the first time ever for St. Benedict in the morning and the evening sessions. On Sunday, our RCIA team, they did their RCIA sessions, continue to journey with our RCIA candidates as they prepare for sacraments. At this time, we don't know exactly when that'll be, but there's no reason why we can't continue to build into them and form them. So there's all kinds of stuff. We're talking about how to continue to gather together our leaders, thinking through how do we do a completely digital leadership summit. And we're going to be planning one of those in the next couple weeks. Next week, we've got our first all staff, or tomorrow we have our first all staff, and thinking through, how do we ramp up the things that already are reaching people, like live stream? How do we innovate around that? So very much moving into even a more missionary position here as we have more opportunities. And the things that have traditionally taken up a lot of time and resources, we can actually scale a lot of those back so we can focus on the things for the new paradigm that we're in.
I love the cadence of not slowing down, but perhaps even speeding up. Now, I know there's a lot of you who are joining from different places in the world, and what I'd love to do is we're going to do a quick poll. And so I'd invite you. There should be a poll. It should pop up for you. What part of the world are you currently joining from? Is the first question. The second question that I'll ask you is, did you watch a parish live stream last weekend? Did you watch a parish live stream last weekend, whether it's your parish or a different parish? And the final question I'll ask is, did your parish stream your last Mass? So was Mass streamed at your parish this last weekend? I just want to get a sense of everyone who's joining us and what your answers might be, and it'd be a fun way to get a sense of who all is out there. So Father Simon, you mentioned a number of different things that are going on in the parish. And I love that sense of cadence and activity, but I can see Eric's is biting to get in, so I'm just going to let him jump in here. You go ahead, Eric.
Part of the reason I jumped in is because he said Father Simon, not Father Alex. But
did I say Father Simon? Alex, how embarrassing! Wow.
I know we look alike. It happens all the time. People confuse us all the time.
I was watching the chat and I saw Father Simon's name over in the chat over there, and but You've got far more hair than Father Simon. It would be hard to confuse the two of you based on looks.
I also would say though that I was actually surprised. I go to St. Benedict Parish, the parish Father Alex's associate pastor at, and I got to say, I don't know what other people's experience was, if perhaps you did in fact watch the live stream of Mass, but I wasn't sure how it would go, and I was so edified that we were able to connect in this way. I mean, I'm sad that we're in the situation we are, but we're trying to make the best of it. And it was surprisingly edifying how we were able to connect, how we prayed together, my family here with the rest of our parish community, praying the spiritual communion together. It was a beautiful connection. And then we're part of a group, a Connect group, and we gave it a go. We said, okay, we're going to try to meet. So we had Zoom coming up. I know we're talking about tools a little bit later on this webinar, but we used Zoom, and we connected, about a dozen of us or so. And again, folks chimed in afterwards. They're texting me and messaging and saying how edifying the gathering was, even though it was being done remotely. So it was a unique experience, a different experience, in some way, sort of a mourned experience, and yet the connection was still there. Folks were able to chime in, and many of the people in our group hadn't had a chance to connect with others in this way. So it was a blessing to be together, so different. So just to speak to some of the things, Father Alex, that you're mentioning, and how they are effective in connecting us, and we're able to reach out. I saw some of the pictures from Alpha, from our parish, but other parishes as well, still being able to connect in this time.
So, Father Simon, with the various leaders at your parish, give me a sense on how they're interacting.
Hey, he's still Father Alex.
Oh my gosh. Did I say it again? Because, this is the most embarrassing ever. I'm so glad we're going to be able to re-record this later. Father Alex. Father Alex, help me understand. How are some of the team members there interfacing with each other? Like, what are some of the patterns you guys are establishing? Because I want to get a sense of how the staff are working inside the parish right now.
Sure. Yeah. So again, so we just let me back up and kind of give a bit of context. Maybe that'll help. So there's been such a crazy pace of change, right? The speed at which everything is kind of changing around us is happening so quick. So, for example, like a week ago Sunday, our announcement was, "Hey, don't shake hands at the sign of peace." And we drained like the baptismal font. And then by Monday, all public masses were canceled in the archdiocese, right? Sundays and weekdays. And then after Monday afternoon, we got the announcement from the Prime Minister, no gatherings above the size of 50 people. And yesterday, our province declared a state of emergency, no gatherings of people, no gathering sizes larger than 5 people. And so the pace of change is just kind of like breakneck. I feel like I have a bit of whiplash from the whole thing. But we're trying to adjust to the new normal and get our team set up to work in that paradigm. A week ago Sunday, we got on our team leads, myself, Tanya, Kate, Father Simon, got on a phone call with Fiona, who kind of set us up to, we hashed out some things and what this past week would look like from a team perspective. Monday morning, we met for an ad hoc all staff meeting with whoever was at the parish. And by Tuesday, everybody was working remotely. And so Tuesday afternoon, I had my first one-on-one, totally online, which went great. And then Wednesday,
so when you say one-on-one, Father Alex, just for those who might not be familiar with that language, what do you mean when you say a one-on-one?
So one-on-one is a meeting I have with somebody on my team, I guess the people that I'm supporting on my team. And on my team is the worship and sacraments team. So we deal with weekend liturgical ministries and sacramental preparation, things like that. Music, there's heavy emphasis on the weekend, and AV. So I meet every week or bi-weekly with one of those people, with each of the members of my team. And so I had a one-on-one with Dinah, and it's just to see, how are you doing? How can I support you? What are you working on? And to help kind of direct priorities. And so we meet to troubleshoot. And so I meet with each member of the team on a regular basis. So by Tuesday, we were all working remotely. Wednesday, I had my regular worship and sacraments team in the afternoon. Everyone on my team was there, and we did a Zoom meeting. And it was, again, like such a quick turnaround time.
Yeah, it's been a quick shift for all of us as we look into the season. Now, Eric, you've had experience working with remote teams, not only here at Divine Renovation as you've joined our team, but in previous roles. Can you share with us some of your experience of how to do that well?
Yeah, I was very blessed to work with a ministry called Catholic Christian Outreach, which some may have heard of, CCO, here in Canada. And I had the privilege of leading remote teams. The team leaders were on campuses across Canada. I was overseeing the eastern half of Canada with our teams, 9 different team leaders in the east here. So it was a great experience for me, but I was thinking about it, and a lot of the principles of the remote working situation that I was in apply here. I mean, different in sort of crisis situation, but some of the principles still apply. My team that I served with was in Ottawa, and we had another team member in Vancouver, and then those that I led, the team leaders, were, as I say, scattered in the eastern side of Canada. So I was thinking about, some of the principles that apply and maybe apply to the situation that we're dealing in now. And one of them is the need to continually cast vision. I mean, that's almost a tired expression in leadership, but it's like it leaks so quickly, and especially remotely when you're not together on the regular, the importance of casting a compelling vision for what the future could look like is so necessary. That we're in this to change the world, that Jesus is active. I mean, Father Alex, for those of you who didn't get a chance to watch the homily from the live stream yesterday, I highly recommend it, because you Father Alex, gave such a compelling vision that no, we're not going to be defined in this time by the virus. We're going to be defined by how we're light. This isn't a time to shrink away. It's a time to step up and continue in our missionary effort as a church. And it was so beautiful and compelling and inspiring. So all that to say that vision continues to be critical, and that's what I found over the years of working with remote teams. The second one I thought of, and this is not exhaustive, but connection, being apart. And Father Alex, you spoke about some of the ways that we're continuing to connect. We found lots of ways to continue regular connection as remote teams. So we would have like a weekly huddle where for 30 minutes we'd get together and sort of share about the highlights of the week, priorities for the coming week. People would share glorious stories, what's happening in their own ministry on occasion as well. But just a time to like everybody get together, huddle up, key communication pieces moving forward for the week. We also had one-on-ones. I had a remote tactical meeting. We had like prayer time together. We had ad hoc calls too. We had a running chat. Like, it seems overkill when I put it in a big list like that, but when working remotely, the need for frequent touch points in communication, I found was so critical.
It's so true, isn't it, Eric? Like, I mean, the more distant we are, and more physically distant you are, you'd think you'd have more time. It's like, okay, now I'm going to get more time to get work done, right? I can focus on my tasks. But even since we've made this transition, I've realized actually it's more about focusing on our people. Fiona, could you speak to that a little bit and just help share some of your perspectives on how that works well?
Sure. I think a couple of things that definitely have been a pattern over all the remote teams I've been privileged to support and lead. First is you have to put more time into the social glue. That means the beginnings of meetings, you can't just dive straight into the content. There's normally some sort of check-in while you're trying to kind of bring people into the room and see where the emotional temperature is. As an all staff, you have to be intentional about gathering a couple of times in the week to leave the space for those connections. And that becomes even more important when, frankly, we're in a pandemic world right now and everybody's got a lot going on. Everybody needs to be able to extend grace and a bit of patience to each other. And that's easier to do when you connect as people and don't just dive straight to the task. And we need to also name the fact we'll still get it wrong. One of the things that we did at our all staff this morning was just remind ourselves that, you know what, kids are going to appear in the background. Dogs are going to go flying across the screen. So you're going to have to drop things at times to run off and sort something out. And we get that. So just making the space for those kind of human touch points to happen is really important. The other thing that, you know, we've really been thinking about with a bunch of parishes is, you know, how do you do this sustainably? Because if you're in leadership in any way, as a pastor or on a leadership team, as Dan has said, that extra set of demands on your time for connection is in an absolute fight with the demands on your time for setting direction, for supporting people, for providing input and guidance. And so how do you balance those things? Because most people, certainly around here and elsewhere, have been putting in 10, 12, 14-hour days. And that's okay for the first couple of weeks of a crisis. You can't run at that pace for 3-6 months. So how do you start to shift some of the ways in which you're managing your time so that it's directed to what matters most, so that you are able to take some breaks and manage the pace, and that you're also leading your people through change? Because make no mistake, this is a massive shift, and we've all hit it all at once. So there's just a couple of thoughts.
That's great, Fiona. Now, I'd encourage you, if you're in with us live, to use the question and answer. We're going to leave space for questions, and we'll do our best to field the answers. I think, all of us that are on today have had experience working with remote teams, and Divine Renovation, we've got a team on, I don't know how many countries right now. We got people all over the world. And so we have some experience of how do we do that well. And of course, it's just amped up ever since we've had to go into to managing our organization inside of this pandemic. Recognizing that we've got some interesting questions coming in, could I ask, Martin Jensen's got one for us. And I think this is, a good one for you, Father Alex. But the question would be, how are you doing Alpha? So how is Alpha working? Make it a little more practical for those who are watching.
Yeah, I'm not the one personally running it, but I was actually involved in it. So I am in an Alpha small group, and I was there on Friday. And Tanya, again, is running it. But what she did was she ran one of the videos. She used Zoom. So Zoom was the tool that she used. And she you set a time, everyone kind of zooms in with all the people who are present. And she, gave some opening remarks and welcomed everybody. And then we played the Alpha video. And after the Alpha video, you can actually break people into small groups. And so I got to break into a small group with my Alpha table. So I got to connect with exactly the same people I've been journeying with through the Alpha season. And it was great. Like I was initially really concerned, like, how's this going to go? But we really connected. There was vulnerable sharing. We prayed together, and it was just beautiful to see each other. And I got to do the whole thing in my pajamas. So, win all around. Like it was, now the other thing, we ran a video and the qualities isn't as good. And so, there's things to tweak and learn. I think a live talk, which we do a lot of in our Alpha at St. Benedict, I think that could work really well in an online Alpha. So that's just kind of off the top of my head.
People were able, if I can ask, Paul, Alex, like people were able to share, you said pretty openly, like it wasn't sort of like awkward or whatever, because we had the same experience in our Connect group. We use Zoom as well, this platform that we're running this webinar on. And we were able to share, like you say, there was a little bit of clunkiness or whatever that came, but overall it was pretty smooth. You found the same thing with Alpha, did you?
Yeah, like again, I was concerned how it would go, but we were vulnerable, we were honest, we were sharing. It was just like we picked up where we left off last week. I was shocked at how well it went personally.
Father Alex, Regina was asking, how are you dealing with Alpha guests who might be less tech savvy or not have easy access to the internet? Was there a plan in place for those folks? How did you connect? What did it look like?
Yeah, so I don't know if I can answer that question in a way that's meaningful because I'm not involved in the Alpha team planning and things like that. I will say we had about half of the people who would normally be there. And so I think, again, part of that is a lot of chaos and so I don't have the answer to that question, but
if you're Father Simon, you'd have the answer to that question.
Well, he's just brilliant. It's hard to live with a guy who knows everything.
I'm just teasing because I kept calling you Father Simon. I appreciate that. I think it's helpful though, just because I know that's obviously one of the things that a lot of teams are wrestling with. And just for those who are listening now, know that we're planning a specific webinar specifically to deal with how to run an Alpha well in this virtual environment.
If I can say, to join through Zoom, you literally, the person who hosts the meeting, in this case, Tanya, sends a link to everyone in Alpha through email. And they literally, if you can use email, you can use Zoom. Like you literally click the link, brings you to the meeting, and you can join from your cell phone, right? Everyone has a smartphone these days.
Yeah,
so.
Just quickly too, like our Connect group we had someone connect who had actually returned from overseas in the last few days, thankfully, and had not had internet at her place, and she called in just with her phone. She could hear everybody. I'm not sure how it would work with the video, et cetera, but just all that to say that that the connection was still possible and was a meaningful connection for her and for our group.
So for those of us who are using Zoom, the free version is what a lot of folks are using now. How are teams managing that? And anyone running into that 40-minute buffer? Are we switching over to the premium? So for those of us who aren't as familiar with Zoom, Zoom is a video chatting platform. It's one that certainly a lot of parishes, churches are using now. It's one that Divine Renovation uses as well. And the free version lets you have, it's like a 40-minute or 45-minute timeline before they just kill the meeting. Or you can shift to a paid version. And so how are you guys using it at the parish? And how about you, Eric, too? I mean, what experience have you got in terms of the paid versus the free?
Yeah, so we ended up using the paid version, but I have used the free version in the past. I think there's a few sort of tech upgrades that you get with the paid, including the breakout rooms. I don't think that's on the free version. I've used the free one and then just reset the meeting. So, I mean, for a small group, it was fine. We just reposted a link and then started the meeting again. But that was our experience. Yeah,
so when we used to use the free one, and we still have some team members who are on free ones, if the 40-minute meeting runs over, they give you like that countdown timer. You've got whatever 1 minute left. We all just look and nod and say, okay, click the link again in 1 minute, and we'll all just jump right back into the meeting. It's an easy way to stay in the free version. Also, let me, for those of us who are in Canada, I know it's the same in the United States, there is reduced charitable pricing for Zoom. So in Canada, we use an organization called TechSoup. In fact, I think it might be the same organization in the United States. I don't know about the rest of the world, but it is a dramatically reduced rate for paid Zoom accounts if you use the charitable pricing through TechSoup. So there's your tip for the day to save some money and get free or to get reduced cost of Zoom licenses. There's a whack of questions that we've got coming in here. Let me ask, here's one. Fiona, this would be interesting for you to get your thoughts into. There is a global shift to remote work happening right now, and it's not because of a bunch of leaders all had the same great idea at the same time. A pandemic is the catalyst driving the shift towards remote work. Can you say something about moving to remote work within the backdrop of this crisis?
Sure. Well, I think that the first obvious thing to state is we're all still working, and it's all still human beings trying to get stuff done. So common sense is a real help in this stuff. What does that mean? Well, it means that, for instance, if you have a team of mixed volunteers and staff, or maybe even volunteers only, and you're a pastor, you're still going to need to connect with your people. You're going to need to talk with them. You're going to need to set direction. You're going to need to pray. So what does that mean? It means that the sorts of meetings that you had previously, you still need some version of. You need a version of coming together with your leadership team to set direction. You need meetings that bring individual teams together so they can stay joined up on what they're doing. And you need one-to-ones, the kind of conversation that Father Alex talked about earlier, going, what are you working on? What have been your wins? Where do you need support? How do we set priorities going forward? However, there are some shifts because some of the rules have changed. When we're doing this in a time of crisis, there's a couple of things that can be really helpful for us when we're leading. The first is, don't try and stick to exactly the same shape meetings as you have when it's all steady or sailing and when you have got time to consider decisions and you're not trying to, frankly, surf a tsunami. So your leadership team meetings, instead of being one longer meeting each week where you're considering the stuff that's coming up and taking decisions, you're probably going to want to shift to twice a week meetings, which are much shorter and sharper in their focus. The other side is that in terms of individual meetings with teams, you're going to need to be a bit more intentional about structure. It's often really helpful to, in the team meetings, start with an opening prayer, go around the table in terms of highs and lows, or something that allows people just to connect as human beings, but then be really clear on what's the structure of the conversation going to be when you're remote. Because a lot of the cues that we use to interact well when we're in groups in a room are missing, or they're dialed down. So what's the purpose of this meeting? What's the objective? What will we have when we leave? What's the structure and how do we use the time? POST. That little way of thinking about how we make the meeting really work can just be helpful, because it needs a little bit more structure because we've got a little bit less in terms of cues. And then I think the third thing that, this shift to remote working, it's about, seeing it as an opportunity. It's not just what we can't do. It does allow us to connect in new ways. It does allow us to shift the needle in terms of what we thought was possible. And that's a great advantage, because we probably wouldn't have gone here as quickly, but there's a whole load of opportunities waiting to be taken advantage of when we do.
Yeah, if I can just take on the back end of that, what I'm seeing is like, this isn't a temporary shift, right? Like, we're not just doing this until COVID-19 passes and life can return to the way it was. Life is going to be different. The structures are going to be different. The church is going to be different. And there's so much opportunity by making this shift now. And, just as an example, I'm thinking of what does our leadership summit look like? Totally digital. And so when things return back to normal, we've created a structure for what it might look like. And so when we are able to gather people again, what's it look like to have, our regular, leadership summit, but have a digital track for people who are away or out of town who can come in and participate in the leadership summit and increase our engagement across the parish that way, right? So building these, structures that will continue beyond the crisis that we're in right now.
At Divine Renovation, part of what our team has built over the past couple of years anyways, is a really strong culture. Now we've got a core team based here in Halifax, but then there's a large number, about half the team are spread in different places around the world. So half of the team is really used to working remotely. The other half, this was a new space for us to step into. And I can remember in the earliest days, which feels like a lifetime ago, but was just like not even a week, was like in the earliest days, I can remember, speaking to members of the team saying, what we've done a good job of is building a really strong and healthy culture as a team. And now we got to figure out how to build a really strong and healthy virtual online culture, which is fundamentally a different thing. And even as I look back over the last week, some of the mistakes I've made and some of the ways our team has gone over some bumpiness, the shift isn't actually as simple as one might expect. And so we got to be really intentional about it. There's a great question here from Father Phil. And so he asks, what content would you recommend for say, 15-minute or more frequent daily check-in meetings for SLTs or other staff members? Is it just updates or topics, things like that? Fiona, why don't you take a shot at that one?
Sure. So I think certainly our experience is that you want to keep those short, sharp check-ins really tightly focused. So it's probably not the space to try and unpack big topics, but it is the space to identify them and give them a home and a set of people who are working on them. So in that sort of 15-minute check-in, whether it's daily or every sort of 2 or 3 times a week, it's look, what's the progress in our priorities so far? Any issues this group's need to make a call on in order to tackle, and any opportunities have just popped up that we want to prioritize. Why prioritize? Because actually new opportunities are going to be popping up all the time, and we need to be making really quick calls as this fluid environment changes day by day around that might have been the thing that we wanted to do last week. Do you know what? The thing just went away. There's a whole new thing that we should now be pursuing, because, for instance, we could have the church open in most of Canada for private prayer and adoration last week. That stopped when it came to this weekend, and the number shifted to no more than 5 people in the building. So you need that space on the short, sharp check-ins to go, how are we doing on the priorities, issues we need to fix, opportunities we need to prioritize. And then what's the list of stuff that needs working outside this room? Who will do what by when? That'll be the 4 things I'd suggest.
Yeah, I think that one of the key messages that you'd be getting from all of us today is the importance of that fast and frequent and more touch points than that you've ever had before, rather than fewer touch points as we shift into this more virtual world. We've got some great questions coming in. I'd encourage you, if you've got a question on your mind or heart, to make sure you share it with us, and we'll do our best to get to them this morning. So one of the good questions that I'm curious to get Father Alex's thoughts on, question was, what are you talking about when there are no services on Sunday? What are you guys talking about now? There's no services on Sunday. What are your meetings about?
Well, oh my gosh. I mean, our last meeting again on the past Wednesday was what are we? Well, there's a million things to cancel, right? Just adjusting to the reality. So who's going to contact who? We're talking about again, our Sunday is more complicated in some ways than it's been in a while, right? So because we're trying to figure out how to make Sunday for people who are watching online, because it's no longer about people who are in the church. There was nobody there on Sunday. And so in our team meeting on Wednesday, worship and sacraments team, it was about, how to design or celebrate Mass in a way that's meaningful and engaging for people who can only watch through a screen. And so that was a lot of work. We're talking about how to move youth ministry online, how to move Alpha online, how to continue to create new connect groups and discipleship groups online. And so there's more things to talk about now than I feel like there ever has been.
So I'd love to get all of your thoughts, and maybe I'll start with you, Eric, in terms of understanding what are the tools that are available to us now. There's digital tools, some of which parishes were already using, some might be new to parishes. I mean, Zoom, we've talked about Zoom a fair bit. It's only one tool, and it's a great tool for video conversations. It's also not the only one in that space, though. So what are some of the tools that we know of that exist, either that we're using or that others are using, that we know could help us operate well in this virtual space?
Yeah, there's a bunch of video platforms. Zoom we've talked about quite a bit, but Google has one. Hangouts or Google Meets is in that same kind of suite. Skype, of course, and some other video ones. Ones for phone, like we found when I was with CCU, I mentioned the weekly huddle. So we had 11 or 12 folks call in. There's a tool called Uber Conference. And there's no 24-digit access code and 39-digit PIN to get into things. You call the phone number and you're in a room on the phone with your team. It was just an effective way folks could do it on the go. You didn't need the internet. So it was an easy and effective way to just get together over the phone and have these little check-ins that Fiona was mentioning, or like I say, our huddles where we did kind of the news headlines for the week through that tool called Uber Conference, uberconference.com. I found also we used online documents. We used Google Docs, and that's where we kept all of our notes in regards to strategic meetings, one-on-one meetings, even the huddle. I had a running doc with that kind of thing, so that there's visibility, because sending documents back and forth in email and you don't know which version it is, etc., was really challenging. And so we made an effort to do all of our stuff on the cloud, and then everybody has access to the most up-to-date things. People can comment on it, etc. So it's a really useful tool with remote, is having your documents on the cloud and everyone accessing it in the same spot.
We at Divine Renovation, we made the shift not too long ago. So we used to be very much focused on Slack and Zoom and Google. Those were our triumvirate of main tools. And we made the shift to Microsoft Office 365, again, for the same reasons that you might be inclined to chase down Zoom. TechSoup has significant discounts for charities, which would include churches, for Office 365. And Slack, which had been our main communication tool for any sort of text inside the team, it does not. We could not access a discount for Slack. And so when we did the cost analysis, it actually made sense for us to go to Microsoft Office and to switch over to Microsoft Teams. So we're on Teams now instead of Slack. They're very, very similar. In point of fact, I've actually quite appreciated some of the things that were in Teams that we didn't have back in our Slack days. But I know for us, we drive so much of our communication through Teams as a tool. So our team is active all day long in various chat rooms and doing direct messages back and forth. Our email traffic is way down as a result. But it brings up an interesting challenge, I think, for any team whether you're dealing with a volunteer team or whether you're dealing with staff team, which is what do you do in case of conflict? I mean, we're in a virtual world now. So Fiona, how do teams manage conflict well?
Well, and it's something we're going to be doing a lot of because we're not perfect at Divine Renovation, neither are the parishes. We're coaching and walking alongside, and what we're hearing back, what we're experiencing ourselves is people are stressed and people have got a million and one things they're trying to master, which are completely new all at once. So actually the potential for conflict, the potential for wires to get crossed, the potential for people's tempers to be a bit frayed it's probably pretty high right now. So when we're in this remote working world, there's a couple of things that can really help. The first is set the ground rule that we don't fight by email, text, or chat, because people will always type tougher than they talk. We are, as human beings, generally not very nice when we're typing if we're really, really annoyed. Banging the keyboard's probably a sign that you should not hit send, you should save to draft. The other thing that we then really encourage all our teams to do, we try to do it ourselves, not always perfectly, is if there is some conflict, try and sort it out one-to-one first. And do that by getting on preferably a video call of some kind, because when you can see the other person, it's just so much easier to cut them some slack, to give each other some grace. But failing that, pick up the phone, have an actual conversation. The other thing that we have used for a long time here as a ministry, there's a book called Crucial Conversations, and it really just offers some very practical tools for having the difficult conversations well. And one of the models that they put in there, which I love, it's the state model, which is if you're really wound up about what someone is doing, sit down with them virtually or otherwise, and firstly, just state the facts. Not your interpretation, not how you feel, just state the facts of what has happened. Tell your story of how that has made you feel, what you have interpreted, what you have understood them to be saying. And then ask for their story, for their take, and do all of that in a language that encourages testing, that's talking tentatively, and that is genuinely trying to hear where the other person is coming from. Amazingly enough, particularly when we're remote working, the potential for wires to get crossed is pretty high. So just going as far as this happened, it felt like this may have been what was going on or what was meant. Is that fair? Shines a bright spotlight on the fact that actually wires have just gotten crossed. Let's get that fixed. If it does really identify the fact there's a fundamental disconnect, a problem, an issue, a conflict, you're at least better set up to have the conversation well. And if you're having it one-to-one, then that's also helpful, because having a fight with an audience on a Zoom call rarely ends well. So those things are worth keeping in mind. We're certainly using them a lot.
I'm struck while we're talking here, like what you said, Alex, what you just said, Fiona, that we're talking so much about people now. Like the programs is kind of like it's gone. Like you said, Father Alex, we're canceling everything. We're remote, so we're almost forced. You said it earlier this week, actually, Fiona. Maybe you could speak to that, but we're forced, our missionary effort in a sense is expedited with this situation, because we can no longer, I guess, lean on what we normally sort of do or normally are as a church. We have to focus on people, not programs. You said it better than me though. So maybe you could speak to that expediting nature of this whole thing.
Sure. Yeah, one of the things we touched on our last conference call was, many of us may have thought there was, 5, 10, 15, maybe 20 years ahead of us as the church evolved in its shape, kind of gradually found its feet in new worlds and new normals. And that all changed last week. The runway got taken away, and we've all got a little bit of whiplash just getting our head around the new world. But the great news is not only is the mission of the church still the same, making disciples, actually the opportunity has never been greater in our generation, because suddenly there are people who are desperate to get into this conversation because they have got nowhere else to go. And in love, we want to get into this conversation because we know we have answers that will make all the difference to them. And so when we're thinking about our remote working, when we're thinking about engaging digitally well, one of the opportunities for us here is to be Christian in how we engage, to model what doing that well looks like with one another in work, but also with how we come together as groups, how we reach out into the communities, how at every turn we're thinking about how socially distant doesn't mean spiritually far away. It means right by their shoulder. It means praying with them, cheering them on, calling them to Christ.
Yeah,
Amen.
I was worried for a bit because, amen, yeah. Because it's like we can't, the church can't sacramentalize at the moment as but we can't even, it feels like we can't even socialize sometimes, but actually we can. Like, we can still, talk to our neighbor across the street, as I have a couple of times, or like Father Alex spoke to yesterday in his homily, like we can actually use our phones to call people, telephone call and message folks who we might not actually normally do. We can do in a situation like this. So we actually still can socialize, reach out, interact with folks, and it's an exciting time as a church.
And I love some of what we're seeing in the coaches we work with around the world in our network. I think of a parish in the UK, which has launched a Guardian Angels program, reaching out to all of the vulnerable in its society and its kind of geographic area. And they've been really wise about this, because they have mobilized their kind of youth up to the age of 30 to really reach out and support seniors, the vulnerable, those who are self-isolating. But they've also put in place a coordinator, coordinating and supporting those folks, because what they recognize is two things. One is this needs a bit of discernment about exactly how it's done, as the limitations on how we connect, about what it's appropriate to do, what the authorities are asking us to keep in mind. So that needs to be worked through and figured out really quickly and then done well. They also recognize that there are going to be people who die during this process, during this pandemic. And so those who are supporting them and loving them are themselves going to need support. So what does that look like? We've got, a parish here in Halifax, which basically did a drive-through food drive to help get food and supplies to support those who suddenly find themselves cast into a time of real need, practical need, because they've just lost their jobs. And those are just two examples. There are so many more where our ability to reach out, our ability to love, is matched with a very practical care and concern. And it's always a both and, right? That's deeply Catholic. It's a both and we're doing both and we're not going to stop. We're just going to keep doing more of this.
Right
so
on.
There's a beautiful blend in this conversation between sort of the practical and the vision, and so I'm going to drive us to something super practical, because I was watching the chat go by, and so there's this question around the differences between the various video conferencing tools, which are like Zoom and Hangouts and Microsoft Teams and a variety of others. And so I'll comment very briefly on what is now very practical, which is what in our experience of these various video platforms. We always found Zoom was the simplest for the non-techies to use, because honestly, at the end of the day, it's basically you send the link, the meeting link, and they're able to click on it and get access to the meeting. And so when we started with our coaching at Divine Renovation, we landed on Zoom as the option, because we recognized a lot of our parishes that we were going to be working with, we're going to have a lot of people that might not be technically inclined. And so as you evaluate which tool might be right for your context, for your parish, understand that we found Zoom to be the simplest for an environment where there wasn't a whole lot of technical aptitude. At this point, about half of our meetings are on Zoom, and the other half are probably on Microsoft Teams. Now, there's a few of you who are watching who have figured out how to vote for questions. And so indeed, that's a feature inside of this webinar. And I can see the question at the very top, and it seems like it's one worth actually asking. This one's by Becca. And her question is around tips for praying. What are some tips for praying as a staff and as a team remotely? Father Alex, why don't we go to, well, let's throw it to the guy with the collar. He knows.
Yeah, right, because I'm an expert. Yeah.
I'd be curious.
I have prayed before, so yeah. Once I tried.
Well, see, the other two on this call I was praying with earlier today, so I feel like we've got our patterns. I know what their answers are. I don't know exactly how St. Benedict Parish is approaching it, and how you and Father Simon are approaching it.
Well, again, right, so we've been in this remote work scenario for about a week. So we're learning, what I've learned is don't pray a common prayer where everyone says the same thing with all the microphones on at the same time, because it's super awkward with the timing. Everyone's got to be muted except for the kind of the one who's, so if you're doing like a Hail Mary, only that person can do it. And our all staff tomorrow, Dan is going to lead us through the Stations of the Cross. Dan Ramos, our seminarian intern, he's going to lead us through the Stations of the Cross. So that's kind of a cool little thing. I haven't done or tried praise and worship yet. I don't know how that would go, but you know, the kind of where people take turns praying, that works really well, right? So there's just a few thoughts.
We did it on our Connect group. Someone led a song, we muted everybody. So it's a bit different, of course, because you're praying with who's ever in the room with you, singing sometimes by yourself, I suppose, in some situations. But it was great. I shared my screen. We had the lyrics up. It didn't take an overly technical approach to have a meaningful prayer time. That's what I would say. Like, even in like all the times I've prayed one-on-one and in group settings, having deep, meaningful encounters with the Lord as a team is possible. Is even, I would say, regular. You know, that's a thing that the Holy Spirit is going to use what we have available in a profound way. So it's maybe awkward at first, but time and time again, I've seen the Lord show up big time, even over like video or over the phone. So,
and I think,
possible.
Eric, you know, I think it's important to not see these circumstances as an excuse not to pray. That, you know, we should just get down to work because, you know, time is more limited and we've got more to cut. No. I think I wouldn't say if there was a time where we actually should be leaning into that space as teams, as volunteers. And I think this is the time, and that we should be super intentional. And also, the more we do it, the less awkward it will feel. I can think of the mass we were watching on Sunday as we watched you preach it up, Father Alex. There was a moment before then, my wife Laura and I, when the worship band first kicked in, we're like, wait, did we sing? Like, this is our living room. Are we supposed to be singing right now? Like, the words are there. Like, we're supposed to sing now, right? So this is a moment of, oh, right, yeah, like we're supposed to be involved and invested fully, even though we're virtual. And so there's an element of we have to knock down those walls for each other, because, you know, this is our lived reality right now as communities and as Christians, and so we gotta step into it bravely and fully.
Yeah, and it's going to be awkward out of the gates. Like we as a Connect group prayed the Rosary on Thursday, Feast St. Joseph. The Pope had invited folks to do it. And yeah, it was super awkward at first because you start praying a communal prayer, the Hail Mary, and then you restart because the echo comes back and say, okay, where am I? It was just like a gong show at the beginning. But we got a cadence and got into it, and we did it, you know, and again, it was an encouraging time. So awkward at first, but it works. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, and if you're watching this, you're in a leadership role of some sort. I mean, you're in a position of some sort of influence, and so it might fall on you to be the one that creates the awkward. But the awkward is worth it. The awkward is worth it. I see that I'm wondering if the Q&A room is now stacked, because I saw a Father Simon Lobo question made it to the very top of the list. And so I'm just not sure how many are voting for him rather than voting for the question, but I think it's a good question nonetheless. So the question he asks, and I'd be curious to get your answer to it, Father Alex. When a team is in a room with a whiteboard, it seems like it'd be easier to brainstorm. So how do you do that effectively in this video chat world?
Well, I'm not sure Father Simon, the guy that I live and work with, is interested in my answer to that question. But I'll just give, you know, a few thoughts. It's funny, you know, we live in a whiteboard world. This room I'm sitting in has 3 large whiteboards. In my house, where I live with 3 other priests and a seminarian, we have a whiteboard in our dining room, and I have a whiteboard in my bedroom. So when we did our worship and sacraments team meeting on Wednesday, I was really concerned, like, how am I going to do this without a whiteboard? How are we going to have a meeting without a whiteboard? But again, in Zoom, I discovered there's a virtual whiteboard option, believe it or not. And it was really cool. It actually worked. I thought almost as good as the real thing. And so you're able to like doodle on it and, you know, type in text and different symbols and images. And I actually was like, wow, this worked really well. So I think there's, again, the tools that we use can make a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see Mandy in the chat is mentioning that Trello is one other option for how you might engage in that space. Fiona, what would your experience be in terms of how to do virtual brainstorming well?
So I think that there's a couple of things. I love the whiteboard in Zoom. I'm a big fan of that feature. Or you can use the Trello. You can just pull up a slide and have one person capturing. You can share the slide on Zoom or on Teams, then have someone capturing what people are coming up with. The other side is brainstorming. Is usually, you know, you're just trying to find ways to get people to come up with ideas. So sooner than having everyone just kind of come in and try and talk, you can actually do something which feels slightly awkward but can work, which is right. We want to think about this. Now everyone just stop for 3 minutes, go away, do your own brainstorm, then come back. and we'll play back the answers, and that can be helpful if you are. I will admit to having a whiteboard at home as well, which is very sad. And if that's the case, you can actually then set up your camera so that it's seen on the whiteboard. If you write large enough, people can see it. It's not great, but it's good enough. So that's just a couple of practical things.
I've found actually, I've actually found it a little more challenging to step into conversations with that sort of that blank slate approach, since we've made the shift to being all virtual. I get jazzed off the energy of being in a room with a bunch of markers, and Fiona has a weapon at our office that occasionally makes its appearance. Fiona, what is your weapon of choice in the meeting room?
So we at Divine Renovation are a firm believer in Nerf guns, but when I joined it a year ago, I had to point out to the guys that while they had a Nerf cow and a Nerf monkey, which shot a little foam ball when you press their tummy, they didn't have any Nerf unicorns, which I was very distressed by. So as an essential component to really high quality conflict management, I insisted to Dan that he buy me a pink unicorn, which he did, and it's fairly vicious with the foam balls that it sends. So he's feeling very grateful now in remote working that he is delivered from that reality, but it will come back, Dan, don't you worry.
I knew I was missing something we were missing something over here at St. Benedict. That's why they pay you the big money, Fiona.
Well, it was from you guys that we learned the essentialness of Nerf weaponry inside of any good meeting. As we've made this transition to a non-Nerf environment, it's almost more painful than the non-whiteboard environment, because how can you shoot people with large foam balls if you feel like they're going down on a tangent? Now, I want to make
Father Alex has it there. He got it.
Father Alex is shooting me with Nerf balls right now, I think. So one of the things I wanted to mention, because Fiona, you talked about the essentialness of social glue. One of the things that our team at Divine Renovation is going to be doing, actually this week will be doing our first one. We're doing a virtual happy/coffee hour as a team, where it's a non-required attendance, but the team are invited to come and hang out and just spend some time together, drinking coffee or beverage of your choice. You've got a whack of different time zones, so coffee might be a very bad idea for some time zones, whereas it's an absolutely appropriate idea for others. But recognizing the importance and opportunities around creating social glue, and also to make sure people don't feel isolated right now, because I know a lot of team members are perhaps in environments where they don't have quite as much social activity around them with these new requirements. So being intentional about creating a social space is one of the things that we're also seeking to do. I'm going to give you guys one last question, and so I'll ask Fiona to speak on it first. When a team shifts to remote work, do they continue the current meeting rhythms through video conferencing, or is there additional meetings that they're going to delete because they're now working remotely?
So we touched on part of this earlier, which is that there were some things that getting your all staff together, and that may include key volunteers as well, because many of our parishes, it's a pastor plus volunteers. So getting your key folks together, you're going to want to keep doing that. Having those who support folks in particular areas, those sort of kind of drumbeat of regular meetings, just running the organization, those are going to want to keep happening. Your one-to-ones are going to want to keep happening, but they may end up being, as we touched on earlier, a bit shorter and more focused. The other side is as a leadership team. And, if you're dialing into this as a pastor and you're sat there going, hold on, Divine Renovation, I've been thrown into this journey. It wasn't even my idea. I don't even have a leadership team. Well, start by getting 3 or 4 folks in your parish who you trust, who are focused on mission and wanting to see this as an opportunity, and begin there and meet with those folks. Instead of it being once a week for a longer, maybe 90-minute or 2-hour meeting, which is quite structured and where the topics are looking 12, 16, 18 weeks ahead, get them together for 2 meetings a week, much shorter, much sharper, looking at what are our immediate priorities, how do we drive progress on those to be a disciple-making church, reaching out in love and bringing the good news, and then what are the issues, what are the opportunities that we're going to attack left and right as we go.
Well, thanks so much for all of you for being with us, those who are in this conversation on this panel, the people all who joined us via chat, and those who submitted questions. It's encouraging to see so many of you looking forward as we continue as a church to recognize our role, even in this season, is to bring people into a loving relationship with Jesus. And here at Divine Renovation, we seek to continue to inspire and equip you to do exactly that for your parish, to become missional. And we're just grateful that we're able to be part of the conversation. So thank you for being with us today. We look forward to being with you again later this week, where we'll be having a few more webinars that are going to be really exciting with great content. We look forward to seeing you later. God bless.